Everybody, it's so good to have y'all with us tonight. While you were talking, at Terry, the Georgia group was saying it's time, so I was just relaying the message. So,
Okay.
so
Hey, we were picking on Scotty. You got a phone call a while ago, and we thought he was going to have to go do his work that he's supposed to be
yeah,
retired from, that he refused to be retired from.
yeah. If it's listen, I'm retired, but if it keeps going like this, I'm gonna have to go back to work. so so it's good to have everybody with us tonight. We're looking forward to what Terry has studied to deliver us tonight. Those of you listening by Power Faith Radio, we thank you so much for coming this way. And please get your pen and papers out. We've got a couple of questions, but I'm not going to ask any of them tonight, Terry, because a couple of them's pretty good, and we need to just hold on to those.
Well,
And
keep a hold of them, because remember, here toward the end of January somewhere, we're going to try to do another Q&A.
right,
So one of those,
right.
because
So
that last one was really good, had some good discussion and good questions.
yeah. So just send those questions on in. Also, if you're listening tonight via one of the two Facebook groups, A Simple Walk or B'nai Noach Connection, no, B'nai Noach Fellowship, we thank you so much for tuning in there. And now A Simple Walk is a public group. You can share those videos with all your social media platform. And it's brought to you tonight by Outreach Noah. You can find us at Outreach Noah YouTube channel. While you're over there, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and then you can also go to outreachnoah.com for our webpage. Send us an email to outreachnoah@gmail.com. Did I get them all in there?
Yep.
Okay.
Scotty, you know what? I had a thought as you were saying that. First time I ever had this thought. I'm gonna go get me one of those little bells I used to put on at the desk at the hotel. So every time you say hit that notification bell, I'm gonna go ding.
Ding, ding. I've got a bell on my machine here someplace, but I'm afraid I don't know where it's
Don't
at.
go pushing no buttons.
Yeah. So, all right. Terry, how about greeting everybody in the Zoom room tonight? And I'll get ready for our Sadaka time.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Greetings again. Tonight, I think we'll look forward to what we're going to get into. I mentioned it a little bit last week before I actually got back into my studies and saying, oh, tonight's going to be a really good night to get into it. Tonight, we're going to get into the prophecy of Noah that we're going to read a little bit about here in a minute. And we're going to discuss that a little bit tonight. So if you got your pens and papers and notepads and tablets, whatever it is you take notes with, you may want to jot a few things down. I want to greet everyone. Of course, Scotty's down in the engine room trying to keep from pushing too many buttons and making the room go dark again. That give him a hard way to go. And then we've got Bob and Ronald and Veronica, Wendell and Karen. Karen, are you the Karen in Alabama that we haven't seen in a while?
I think it is.
Yes, sir.
There she is.
How you and hubby doing?
Tell them hi.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going? hadn't heard from you in a long time.
We're still here.
Well, that's good. All right, and we got Will, and then we also have Annie, Scotty's better half down. Has anyone heard from Emwella? Is she doing okay?
Oh, she texted me earlier, and she is wore out. She had to.
She went to Timmy's.
Well, she went out today and wore herself out, so she wasn't able to go to make it.
I know. She needs to get her rest. Scotty, you about ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm just sitting here waiting now. Did you do everybody? And I think you did. So, again, we want to say we appreciate everybody who contributed to our Sadaka time tonight. And you can send those names in. We had a few people send some more names in. You can send them on in. You don't have to send any kind of money with that. Just send us a name, and we'll be glad to add them to our Sadaka list. So, as always, getting started off tonight, we always give tzedakah for Terry and I's main teacher in Sfat Israel, and that's Pesach and Shira Sherbo. Also, Wendy Shepherd is on our tzedakah list. Ronald, have you heard anything about Wendy? Is she okay?
No, still no response.
Okay, we're going to continue to have her on our tzedakah list. Also, Nadine Akins is on our tzedakah list tonight. Also, William and Tina Lyons is in our tzedakah list tonight. Clifford Hoole is on our tzedakah list tonight. Veronica, they sent and put your name at the top of the list tonight, and they're calling you. What are you calling yourself? They're calling you the Traveler. they calling you the traveler because they love looking at wherever place you've been. You crossed the Georgia line today.
I did, and I've got two names. One is either the Wandering Boy or the Noahide Nomad.
So she is traveling the country doing a book signing tour. So anyway, Veronica, they sent in tzedakah for you for safe travels, but that's your dollar. And also they sent in $1 for Amuela Asher to go in the tzedakah, and also for Thomas Schaus. And then also we have Warwick Marshall on our tzedakah list, and his mother. Ronald, have you heard anything about Warwick's mother and Warwick himself?
No, I haven't had any contact so far this week, so I can't update.
Okay. And then very next in line is you, Ronald. How you been doing?
I've been doing very well this week. It's been a really good week. I'm so pleased.
Great. Also, we have the Jones family. I want y'all to remember the Jones family. And then we got Christina Seaton Thompson. How is she doing, Ronald? Have you heard anything from Chrissy?
She's getting better. She's still got to take it easy. But yeah, there's been a lot of improvement there.
Okay. And then in our blessed memory tzedakah list tonight, we have Philip Hayes. That is Terry's father. We have Philip Hayes. And then also we got Larry McGee. Larry McGee in our blessed memory tzedakah list tonight. Would you help us pray tonight? Hear our voice, Adonai, our God, Father of mercy. Have compassion on us and accept our prayers with compassion and favor. For you are a God who hears prayers and supplications, our King. Do not send us away empty-handed. Favor us and answer us and listen to our prayers. Amen. All right, Terry, are you ready for me to turn it over to speaker view and get you going?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay, here we go.
Is my mic okay tonight? Is it not broken? Good and clear. Okay. Are we ready? Thumbs up there.
Ready to go.
Ready, Freddie. All right. Tonight we're going to continue in our book study, The Seven Gates of Righteous Knowledge, on page 47. And we're going to be reading here. If you have your Art Scroll Humish, we're going to be reading here in just a few minutes from prophecy, what's called here the prophecy of Noah, or the covenant that God made with Noah and his descendants. But in page 47 at the top of the page, it says, likewise, Noah received prophecy from God that he should be involved with building an ark for 120 years. Now, what's interesting, I've got a book on Noah that's really interesting, that gives quite a bit of traditional information from the Jewish people that have kept this information for thousands of years. That 120 years, they kind of give a breakdown. I tried to look for it and I couldn't find it this week. It's been a kind of a crazy week. But in that 120 years, it wasn't all just about building the ark. Everything was about building the ark, but it wasn't just like, hammer and nailing there. He actually took and planted acres and acres of trees and cedars, and actually grew them. Then he harvested them. Then he milled them. And it was like, I think the actual, if my memory serves right, the actual building the ark only took about 60 years, something like that, out of the 120, about half the time. But it took the biggest part of the time to raise, to harvest and raise and harvest the trees. And I thought that was fairly interesting, because it's stuff like you don't ever really think about. You just think, well, he went and cut some trees down. Well, there wasn't all the trees that he needed there to begin with. And so he had to plant, and I can't remember how many acres. I think they give like an estimate of how many acres of trees that he planted and harvested to build the ark. But it says to forewarn the generation of the flood, impeding consequence of their evil actions, and to save himself and his family from the waters of the flood. His prophecy was for his whole generation and had great importance for all of them, but nevertheless, it was mainly focused on the period of time within his generation, from the time he started building the ark until the end of the flood. Surely this was quantitatively a small prophecy in comparison to the greater prophecy to Noah after the flood, in which God made the everlasting covenant of the rainbow, that he would never bring another wholesale destruction of all mankind, leaving only a saving remnant. And he commanded the 7 Noahide laws, and these, and it says, those were prophecies for all future generations for the whole world. And what we're going to be going through, because I know when you hear this right here, and he commanded the 7 Noahide laws, and I know those have that studying the Torah is new, is going to like, I don't read that in that story. So tonight we're going to learn a little bit where in studying the Torah, you'll see where the sages teach that. If you have your Hamish or whatever the scriptures that you have, we're going to be going to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9. And actually, much of this story begins a little bit further up in the passage, but I'm thought about going into that, and I may come back to that if we have the time. But I really want to get into this main section. That way, Scotty, if we have anybody wants to discuss anything, got any questions as we're going through it, just let me know, and we'll stop and discuss it. And please, if you do have some questions as we go, feel free to shoot them to Scotty and to Ronald, and they'll get them to me, and we'll stop and we'll discuss them. In chapter 9 of Genesis, and also this is called Parshas Noah. The Torah is divided into readings, and this parsha is actually called Noah. And so in verse 8, we're going to begin in verse 8, and it says, "And God said to Noah and his sons with him, saying," and I'm just going to read through this, and then we're going to come back and go through it. "And as for me, behold, I will establish my covenant with you and with your offspring after you, and with every living being that is with you, with the birds, with the animals, and with every beast of the land that is with you, all that departed the ark, to every beast of the land. And I will confirm my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I have given between me and you and every living being that is with you to generations forever. I have set my rainbow in the cloud, and it is a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And it shall happen when I place a cloud over the earth, and the bow will be seen in the cloud, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living being among all flesh, and the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living being among all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have confirmed between me and all flesh upon the earth." Now, let me see here. my other Genesis out here. Those who like to study, I really recommend matter of fact, hold on just a second here. These two books right here are just on Genesis. That's just the commentary that's on the book of Genesis. And this is called the Art Scroll Tanakh series. You can get it through, hold on, Scotty. Let me put my chat on. Hold on here. There we go. Scotty, I almost hit the wrong button there myself. Let me get the chat on here. Forgot to do that. That way I see anybody comes up. Now, this is the what's called Bereshit. It's the Hebrew word is translated as Genesis. Art Scroll Tanakh series. I have the information and all that in our outreachnoah.com website. I have a site there, or a page on there that has all these references that I quote from, that you can go on there and you can see the name of the book and also the publisher there. You see here, where to go? I think it was verse 9. Yeah, verse 9. Let me go back and forth here. In verse 9, where it says, "And as for me, behold, I will establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you." What's interesting, that word offspring there is the root word zera, which means seed, his actual physical seed. This covenant is made with the physical seed of Noah, which is everyone that's on the earth this side of the flood. He's considered the second Adam. He started man afresh. Again, a whole new journey of man through him. And it says here that Stefano, the Torah says Stefano explains that the covenant to not destroy the world was on the condition. This is interesting because it's, like I said, this falls back into the couple of verses beforehand. The covenant not to destroy the world was on a condition that they shed no innocent blood. If murder were to become rampant again, the world would be destroyed. This is dictated by the fact that the covenant is preceded by the prohibition of murder. Other sins, however, would be punished without total destruction. Because we see here in verse 5, it says, "However, your blood, which belongs to your souls, I will demand. Of every beast will I demand it, but of man, every man for that of his brother, I will demand the soul of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God he made man." Murder, if it becomes rampant, because it's right here, it says, "And you shall be fruitful, multiply, and teem on the earth, and multiply on it." And then that's a whole lesson right there about the message of what our mission is as the non-Jewish people establishing societies across the world. But the Creator wants us to be fruitful and to multiply. But before he gives this, and then he gives the covenant, we have the prohibition of murder. And if murder comes to the point, because when you murder someone, you're destroying the image of God that's in that person, and the image of God that would be in that person's generations throughout the rest of the history of mankind, that is destroyed from that. And so when murder comes about, the sages have said, if murder was to become so rampant on the earth that every nation was just rampant with murder, that again would bring the destruction of man, because man is already destroying himself. And we're going to see that here a little bit too when we get get a little bit further down here. And so I found that very interesting because I hadn't caught that before on the aspect that murder was established, the prohibition of murder was established again before the giving of the covenant. And so the Torah sages connect the two together on how bad murder is, that actually it could bring the destruction of man, where other sins would just be dealt with. But murder would actually become, if it became worldwide, then there would be a worldwide kind of involvement of the Creator again. Now, I've got a question I want to ask. It says here, and I will, in verse 11, I will confirm my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. My question is, why was there a flood to begin with? Why was there a flood to begin with? Got anybody want to throw an answer out there? Nobody's answer? Okay. Here, let me. In Genesis chapter 6, in verse 11, now the earth had become corrupt before God, and the earth had become filled with robbery. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, end of all flesh had come before me, for the earth is filled with robbery through them. This is the reason why there was a flood. The sages teaches us now in the Hebrew, where it says the earth had become corrupt and where it had corrupted its way, refers to the sins of idolatry and immorality, sexual sins, and theft was actually with the robbery, Hamas, where it says that the end of all flesh has come from before me, for the earth is filled with robbery. That word is Hamas. Are y'all familiar with that word? Do you hear it in the news very often? It's the same word. It's generally translated as robbery and violence. Between the two Hebrew words that is translated as corrupt and robbery, this is the violation of the 6 commandments that was given to Adam, that was passed down. Prohibition of idolatry, the prohibition of blasphemy, the prohibition of forbidden sexual relations, prohibition of theft, prohibition of murder, and also there's the establishment of just courts. And the establishment of just courts was not being done because there was no courts upholding these laws. It began rampant, where it says all flesh had corrupted its way. This even included the animal kingdom at that time because of the things that they were doing. The animal kingdom became corrupt along with mankind. And so this is where the rabbis, when they see, and you go back to Genesis 2:16, is where the 6 commandments is derived from, where it says, Va'asaf Hashem Elohim al Hadam, where he commanded man. And theft and immorality was the 2 of the things that happened at that time with the tree. And we've discussed that in the past, which also included the violation of idolatry, because they were setting themselves up, doing what they wanted to do. But the biggest one was God set a boundary up. He said, this is mine, this, and that's over there is yours. And they crossed the boundary. So we see here, as the sages has taught us, that the Noahide laws is what was violated here. What we call the Noahide laws today. Wasn't called that back then. It just, this was how God gave man to live. These 6 precepts. And what's interesting, in verse 13, and God said, the end of all flesh had come before me, for the earth is filled with robbery through them. Behold, I'm about to destroy them from the earth. Some of the sages teaches a very interesting teaching along with this, that the end of all flesh has come before me. And there is an alternate teaching or accompanying teaching, however you want to put it, that when God was looking down on the earth, the condition of the earth, the corruption of idolatry, immorality, and theft and murder, and there was no one that was setting up, keeping the laws. It's like in our nation today, we're a nation of laws, but there are things that are going on in our nation to where our courts are just ignoring the laws and letting people, there are cities and states that are saying people are permitted to steal up to a certain amount, but that you can't even report them. They're permitting the prohibition of theft to be done. And this is going back toward the direction of what caused the flood, was the ignoring that these laws were being done, and everybody was running rampant, and it said all flesh had corrupted their ways. And the sages, when they see this and they look at this and they say, the end of all flesh has come before me, they're saying that the man had become so bad that man was about to annihilate himself. If it had been let go and not taken care of, man was about to destroy himself. The end of all flesh had come before him. So the Creator steps in and destroys the wickedness. And where we, like right here in the beginning of this parsha, where it says, these are the offspring of Noah, that Noah was a righteous and perfect, which that word there is tamim, which means he was a morally pure man. And he was a righteous man in his generation, and he walked with God. And so we've seen when God looked upon the earth and he seen Noah, he was the one that was doing what was right, while the rest of the world was going the other direction, and they were going to the point where they were about to annihilate themselves. And so he destroyed the earth and he saved the righteous man. And one of the interesting points here is that it's not the status, the spiritual status of his wife and children is not listed here. And so there are some people, as they grow in their knowledge and learning of the Creator, especially in these, in these precepts that was handed down from Adam and then from Noah and Abraham. And maybe they become like a spiritually mixed marriage. And so I see a lot of questions in groups that I'm in. What do I do? My mate still believes this over here, or does this, or doesn't. And so we're not permitted to put away our mates if we are different there, because we look. God said that Noah was righteous, but he was to take his wife and his children with him. The Creator could easily have let them go and made Noah a new wife on the other side, but that would have probably devastated Noah if that had happened. And so he took his wife. God said, take your wife and your children. No spiritual status there. Only spiritual status we know about is Noah at this point. And so this is interesting when you study this and we begin to look at our lives and how a lot of things line up with what was going on with Noah. We have a lot of similarities in our own lives. So we see here that these laws, the violation of these 6 precepts of Adam, the 7th one was given to Noah after the flood concerning the eating meat, which we won't be getting into tonight. While we see there's seven categorical commands. So we see here, this is why there was a flood. Scotty, any discussion on that before I go on?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I was just going to write it down and wait till you got to a point there. So this is a good point that you brought up about that the text only states that Noah was righteous, that Noah walked with God, and that he was perfect in his generation. So a question from Betty, listening on the radio, why was that? Was there? And of course, she was answering that, but she in her question, was it because they were going to be good after the flood? If there was no, I hope I'm going to put this right, Betty. If you want to restate it, you can. But it didn't mention them before the flood, but were they all good after the flood? And I don't know if you cover that now or.
We have understandings through the events that happened after the flood with his sons. I think there's some information that the Jewish people have about his wife, and I've read it in the past. I don't have that information right here with me tonight. But with his sons, we have something that's very interesting. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which what I'm understanding, the sages says that actually Japheth was the firstborn. But what we have with his children is very, very interesting. Who the rest of the world would be developed from. Andy and I got in a really good discussion on this last Sunday. We spent 2 or 3 hours talking about the descendants of Noah and their scattering up through Europe and things like that. With Shem, we have, I'm just going to start with Ham. We have the situation with Ham, the transgression that had happened between him and his father, which that's not for the discussion tonight. There's a whole discussion on that itself from the sages that tells us that whatever thing that happened there. But Noah ended up cursing his son. And so we see that Ham didn't turn out to be so righteous. And his descendants had trouble with that. Not saying that there is nothing that happened. There was righteous ones in his family, but we're talking about just the sons after the flood. So we see that Ham he chose the route of less righteousness, a troubled walk that he had. And because of that, we have, part of the story where Shem and Japheth takes the garment, the covering to cover up their father, and they didn't look upon the nakedness. What we've learned from the sages is that Shem instituted that. And there's a greater spiritual blessing there for Shem for instituting that. And Japheth helped out in that. He joined his brother. Matter of fact, that's the reason why it says that, the tents of Shem will grow and expand, which there's a lot to that passage, but they will dwell in the tents of Shem. Shem is the son who became Melchizedek, the righteous king of Salem. He was the one who became the Melchizedek, so he was the righteous son. What he was teaching was the 7 precepts, what we call the Noahide laws today, the terminology that we use in today's terms. But he was teaching those, and he taught them to Abraham, him and his grandson, Shem and Ever. There's actually a cave in Israel, not too far from where Scotty and our teachers live is called the cave of Shem and Ever. They had a school there where they taught Abraham and his children the 7 laws. And that is part of a long time Jewish tradition that has been passed down. So we see that Shem did become more in his father's footsteps. Japheth sets under Shem. Shem became the father of the Shemites. Abraham descended from him. And from Abraham came Isaac. And the Torah was given, the land was given, as a promise to Abraham. The Torah was given to Abraham and his descendants through Isaac. And so when we say that we, like Scotty and I, sat and learned from the rabbis, we're in the tents of Shem. It's kind of a part of the prophecy that's going on today that we are learning. That's when the Torah teaches us that the nations will turn to the Yehuda in Zechariah 8:23. Then we have Isaiah chapter 2, the nations coming to the mount of God to learn his ways and walk in his paths. Well, how are we going to do that? We're going to be sitting in the tents of Shem, learning just like what Shem was doing with Abraham. Then we're going to be learning the ways of God. And the nations will eventually return back to that, because all the nations, descends from the 3 sons, and then the one son, through Abraham and Isaac, they were separated as the priestly nation to be the ones that would be teaching the world and being the light of the world in teaching. So yeah, there is some hints of the continuations of Noah's righteousness through the son of Shem and Japheth coming under him. Anything else, Scotty? Are you sure? Try not to stir the pot like we did a couple weeks ago. You dirty dog, what you did to me. All righty. So we understand that when we ask the question, why was there a flood? Because there was an extreme violation. I'm going to put it this way. There was an extreme violation of the 6 precepts that was handed down from Adam down through his children. They had gotten away from the walk with God. Matter of fact, idolatry, we talked about that, started coming in through the generation of Enosh. And it just kept going downhill from there. And so we see why there was a flood, the violation of the commandments. Now we know that God has promised here that he would not destroy the earth and all man. He's not going to wipe all man off the face of the earth with a flood anymore. There are localized floods that may ravage an area, but there will never be a worldwide flood that will destroy all humanity, except for just a chosen few. That's even, Exodus, not Exodus, but Ezekiel chapter 18, where the Creator says, do I desire the death of the wicked? He doesn't desire the death of the wicked. That's why he gives, if wicked people wake up every day and they're breathing, that's another chance to, that they could turn their lives around. Verse 12 says, and God said, this is a sign of the covenant that I give between me and you and every living being with you to generations forever. Now, what's interesting here, let me pull this up here. Is the word generations. I'm trying to remember which one is actually talked about in a couple places. The word generations here is really interesting. It is one of the few words that we find in the Torah that is on purposely misspelled. When the Creator had Moses write down the Torah, this is one of the words. And when a word is misspelled, it is to be a sign. It's to jump out. When the Hebrew people reads this in their language and they see that, it automatically points there's something to look at here. The Hebrew word here for generations is Ledoirot. I'm pronouncing that in the Ashkenazi. Ledoirot. Lamed Dalek Resh Tav. It is missing two vavs. There's supposed to be two vavs in that word, but they're missing. And so Rashi, one of the great Torah teachers, notes that the word generation is spelled defectively without the two vav. It's supposed to be spelled Dalet Vav Resh Vav Tav, indicating that the sign which provides necessary reassurance for the moral defective, undeserving generations. So when we read this here, it says, and God said that this is the sign of the covenant that I will give between me and you and all living beings with you to generations forever, meaning the immoral generations. The immoral generations. What's interesting is one of the other words that's misspelled is the word righteous. When Abraham confronted God about the righteous of Sodom, that word is misspelled. That Abraham technically was asking the Creator that if he would save any of the righteous, even if their righteousness was defective. And the Creator agreed. I want to drop back here to where we were talking about the sins of the flood. I wanted to bring out something the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, one of the great Torah scholars. I wanted to back this up with here reason why God gave the flood. He says, Nachmanides says, God gave Noah the reason for the destruction of the earth as injustice. Now he translates what's interesting is Hamas as injustice, where it's generally translated as robbery or violence, but mostly robbery. But he says the reason for the destruction of the flood was the injustice, and he did not mention the other sin, corrupt of their ways, because as you drop down, he says now the earth was corrupted. I mean, not corrupted, but was full of robbery, and that's when he says, and then the death of, all mankind was going to be happening by this flood. What's interesting is because injustice or robbery is known as a public sin, whereas sexual immorality is a private sin. And the sages have taught us that however, the reason only injustice is mentioned here is that it was specifically over injustice that decree was sealed and not over sexual immorality. What brought on the flood was the injustice and the evil, both toward God and toward man. But his main reason for the injustice here that is brought out here in Genesis chapter 6, in the destruction there of the flood, there in verses 11 through 13, was that the greater sins that brought the flood was the sins that was between man and man. And this is something that it goes through the Torah all the time. We see here, this is the first instance where the Hamas, that which brought the deluge, was because of the sins between man and man, was the main sins. Again, murder is between man and man. But also with Sodom. Because we see in Ezekiel chapter 16, it says, "For this is the sin of your sister Sodom." You know, that she was wealthy. But in the end, it says, "But they did not lift the hands of the needy," because there was actually laws in Sodom to put out and to kill those who gave charity and those who helped others. Sometime we'll go over that. And then we have the story in Nineveh with Jonah. When you see what they were doing, it was robbery. It was so bad in Nineveh that God was going to destroy this city of over 120,000. And they knew what they were doing was wrong, because when you read Jonah and it says, put away the sin and the robbery that is in your hands, that came from the king, not from the prophet. The king of Nineveh said that. They knew they were in the wrong. And they changed. When it said they put on the sackcloth and the ashes and they prayed, we don't read that God heard their prayer. At the end of the story, we read that God saw their deeds. They had stopped the robbery that was in their hands. The robbery, like what we see here at the bringing on the flood, is such a major deal. So we have here the situation where the bulk of the issue of the flood is what we do with each other.
Terry, when you get a chance, I got 2 questions for you, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I did not see them. I apologize. I just glanced at the text and I apologize, Ronald. I thought he was just sharing the text and I didn't read them. But can you go over to the chat area, and he's got 2 questions there. It's going to back you up a little bit, but I think it's going to bring you right where you are right now.
So are there other types of destruction likely? There have been talked about the destructions of like fire and things like that could happen instead of the flood. But part of this covenant here is not only that he's not going to bring a flood on the earth again, but as the sages teaches us, God is not going to destroy all of mankind and only save a small remnant again. And that's what the sages teach with that. Now, according to sages, says now if the earth becomes so full of murder, they might bring a worldwide destruction again. But we don't read anything like that in the prophets or the writings. You see, the nations kind of get a really good heavy spanking in the future, those who come against Israel. But evidently there's still multitudes and multitudes of people still on the face of the earth that will stream into Jerusalem there in Isaiah 2. Verse 5. Let me go back to verse 5. Let's see here. However, your blood which belongs to however your blood which belongs to you and your souls, I will demand. Every beast will demand it, but of man, every man for his brother, I will demand the soul of man. It says, but the blood of your souls, man, I will demand count of your hand. Where he's talking about that, see verse 5. Let me just look right here at the commentary real quick. It says the Torah places another limitations on man's right to take a life. God states that he will demand an account for one who spills his own blood. For a human being, life belongs not to him, but to God. Though Noah had been granted the authority over the animal life, he had no right to commit suicide. Only God had the right to end life. And every beast, it says beasts too are forbidden to kill people. And if they do, they are to be killed through divine means. Alternatively, this passage refers to a person who turns over another to be killed by wild beast. And then the Rambam, and it says the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, says alternately, the verse also refers to murder and warns that God will not permit a murder to go unpunished. He will be hunted down by wild animals or by the hand of man. And see, through this too, we also have the positive command of setting up courts of justice, where it says, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man's blood shall be shed, for he is in the image of God. Now that doesn't permit vigilantism. This is, when you look at it in the Hebrew and the way the sages studies the Torah, knows the will of God, this is an establishment of a court system. That person will be brought before a court and be dealt with.
So,
but even for him to be killed for murder, this is why we have to know our laws. That means somebody kills somebody, we just can't go out. We're not even permitted right now in our day and age, according to the Torah, we are not permitted to put to death someone who violates a commandment to the point of being put to death. What we do is we become liable. We become liable for the death penalty. It means you're liable for it. That doesn't mean you're going to get it. Even in man's courts today, that is there. You come under the hand of heaven when you become liable today. And the reason why we are not permitted to do that is the sages had ruled years ago that the nations who actually write laws that violates any of the 7 commandments, we have been removed the right to put anyone to death that creates a sin or does a sin, practices a sin, does a sin that is liable for death. We are not permitted to do that because we do not have a righteous court system. Because our court systems today, especially in America and other countries, we have adopted laws that permits the violation of one of the 7. And when you do that, you don't have the right to go to the full extent of the law. That belongs to God and Him alone.
So one of the, that's one of the biggest, if I can use the word hangups, that's one of the biggest hangups of people when it comes to Noahide and the laws and the justice and court system.
Well, they always want to run around. I've seen the videos; they're out there. Go out there and get on YouTube if you want to, and you'll find a whole slew of people talking about something they don't know anything about because they've not studied. They'll read that. Actually, be honest with you, our laws are tough before the Creator because we were created as it says here. You are to be fruitful and multiply, and you are to teem on the earth and multiply on it. It's very interesting because it seems redundant in what he says here, but when you look at the Hebrew, it's very interesting that we are to settle. We, the nations, are to settle every aspect of the earth. We are to team. Team. This word is used like, like with the fish, where it says the fish was teeming. We are to heavily procreate, have children, have large families. Now, we know today a lot of us don't have a lot of families, large families like they did, 75 years ago. But we are to multiply on the earth. We are to team on the earth. This is part of what we're supposed to do. It's part of our blessing from God. And we are to set up just court systems according to these 7 precepts. But we have gotten away from that. And the sages have a lot to even say about that. Some of it's not very nation friendly because we have rejected our role of setting up moral and ethical societies. That is part of our mission as human beings. This is the reason why we are given the earth. Israel's given one little spot of land over there. It's called Israel because that's where they are supposed to dwell. That's their homeland. We are in our homeland, and it's supposed to be moral and ethical. But when you get to the point where you're you're not moral and ethical in your court system, it causes a lot of issues. And one of the issues is you are not permitted to put to death someone who is worthy of death. And understand there is some liability in our laws. And so one of them, and you might come across it, and I'm just going to let you know, theft is a major issue. We are liable for the death penalty. Liable, not mean you're going to get it. You're liable if we steal something that has the value of our lowest currency, whatever the land you live in. United States, it's a penny. So if you go in somebody's house and you pick up a penny, you're liable for the court of heaven for your life. And so a lot of people that don't understand the justice of our laws run out there and make these videos that that the Noahides are going to run around and start setting up guillotines and cutting people's heads off for, worshiping this thing or stealing that thing or whatever. No, we can't do that. We can't do it because we don't have just courts.
And even if we had just courts, that
doesn't mean you're going to happen. Put it this way. Israel has even harsher rules with them. They got 613 commandments. In violating the Sabbath for a Jew, oh my days. They can not only lose their life, they can lose their soul. It gets really deep. I'm not going to get into that because, like I said, I studied that stuff for 7 years when I was going to join the Hebrew nation. It's very, 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 very tough. When the Sanhedrin is set up, and the Sanhedrin will actually have a lot to play in the future of the world, along years from now. I wish it would be in our day because things have straightened up a whole lot better and be a lot more ethical and moral. But even in the Sanhedrin, and there are laws within the Jewish nation that causes for liability of death as well. More on them than it even is us. Okay? But here's the rule that has come down when the Sanhedrin was in place. If the Sanhedrin had put to death more than one person, I think Bob, right? More than one person in 70 years, it was considered a bloodthirsty court. God is about life, not death. This is to be a deterrent from living a wicked life. Those who are wanting to walk with God, like with Noah, and just walk with God in an ethical and moral way, you don't have to worry about nothing. If you're not speeding down the road at 900 miles an hour like some idiot, you don't have to worry about the policeman behind the bushes. I mean, that's just all it is. If you're trying to live a moral and ethical life, yes, there are going to be places we're going to slip and fall. Do you not know that the Creator made us that way? We're going to slip and fall. So he's not going to be, God is not around behind every tree looking to when he can kill us. No. This is why we've got to study and know our laws in their depth and their details. And that's why we have to have, when the court systems are set up in the nations, that there are true righteous men who are very well studied and very well knowledgeable in these laws and in these details. So when situations comes before the court, then it is handled in righteousness. And we don't have that. I mean, we've never experienced that kind of court system. I mean, it'd be awesome one day to have that. Go ahead, Scotty. What else you got?
Okay. So on regards to Ronald's first question, so are other types of destruction likely? And you read that, and it's not Bob that's in here. It's another Bob. He listens all the time to the radio. And Bob said, hello, Bob. So can you jump back to chapter 8? You didn't read this tonight, but this is in regards to Ronald's question. So are there, so are other
Right in that.
types of destruction? Start at verse 20, chapter 8, verse 20, and read the last of that chapter from 20 on down. Read that for us, and let's.
Noah built an altar to Hashem and took of now listen here, this word clean is not, no.
Right.
Even Art Scroll admits that they don't translate everything because it's the English language. The word here, clean, in Hebrew doesn't mean clean. It actually means it's a purity. It's a spiritual purity.
Right.
Okay. Now Noah built an altar to Hashem and took of every clean animal and every bird and offered a burnt offering on the altar. Hashem smelled the pleasing aroma, and Hashem said, let me see. It said in his heart.
But before you read further, now this is God speaking in his own heart, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now keep reading. I'm going to hit these points as we go through.
I will not continue to curse again the ground because of man. Actually, I have some stuff on all of this. I thought about bringing up tonight, but I thought, man, I better not, because it's just too much. Sometimes when I'm studying, I get too much. So he will not curse again the ground because of man, since the imagery of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor again will I continue to smite every living being as I have done.
Now here it is. Keep
continuously all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
Now to explain it,
shall not cease. We got about 4 classes that we can do right here on these few.
I know it. So I mean,
okay,
go ahead. I could start just dumping some questions on you from this.
Okay, hold on. As I was studying this week, let me go back, see if I can find this one thing, because I wanted. It's a good point, Scotty. I hope you don't mind. We're going on. Is everybody?
We're going to go over because.
Is everybody okay where we're going?
I think it's needful right now because this is a great presentation in the text right here.
21.
Will's got his thumb going up here. He's see, because my view, while you're looking for that, what I see here is a seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Now, is this a continuation of what the Creator is saying in His heart?
Okay.
Is all this?
Let me pull back to that. Let me 8:12. Again, I read and I study so much here. C21, the imagery. Okay, yeah, right here. I wanted to come back to this point to let people understand what he's talking about here in the Hebrew, where it says, I will not continue to curse again the ground because of man, since the imagery of man's heart is evil from his youth. Now, there's some religions that want to take that right there and say that we are deprived and we're worthless and there's no hope and all that for us. No, that's not what that means. As people have, if you've listened to us very long, you understand I've talked about the evil inclination and the good inclination that's within man. We have 2 inclinations after the tree. We have 2 inclinations. This is what ensures us of free choice. And so when it says here, when the Creator says that man's heart is evil from his youth, the Ramban, again, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, he says the imagery, or literally the formation of man's heart is evil from his youth. God continues to find extenuation circumstances in man's sins, for he receives the evil inclination from birth. See, this comes upon you at birth, before he has the wisdom and the maturity to combat it. Thus, man is undeserving of extermination for his sin. Man is deserving of extermination from his sins. Because this evil inclination that causes us to make the foolish things that we do in our youth is there before we have the wisdom to conquer it. Now we go back to Genesis chapter 4:7, where God told Cain, he says, if you do good, if you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. But if you do not, then your bad decisions are laying at the door there for you. The sin is laying at the door. But he says, but you can conquer it, meaning that Cain was of an age at that time that he had the maturity of choice to follow his evil desires or to follow the good desires. And I could even get even more into that when God says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart. Again, in the Hebrew, there is a spelling of the word heart that was a sign for the rabbis to see something. There are in the letter bet, lev, lamed bet is heart, lev is heart. But in that verse, it has two bet. It's lamed bet. And so the sages teaches us to love God with all your heart means to love God with the evil inclination and the good inclination too. All your heart. And there's actually, the sages teaches us that we can take and turn a sin into a merit. Because anytime that maybe you have, you committed a sin and then you have repented through that transgression, and you've done perfect repentance, meaning that you have walked away from that sin, never to commit that sin again, then you have actually, that sin was good because it caused you to change. That's a whole different mentality than what we were raised with. I won't get all into that, but go ahead, Scotty.
Well, no, I was just, Bob reiterated here that his core purpose for bringing this up was the 22nd verse. Continuously, all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest time, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
Okay, what this is about, there's a lot of good teachings here for the Noahides. This is actually a very important passage for us on some issues that we're not going to deal with tonight that's brought up in this passage. Look at Bobby's over there.
I see you, Bob. And Bob.
I know Bob has studied the works of the Rebbe. So, and he's probably studied the Rebbe's teaching on this passage. Continuously, all the days of earth, after the flood, the seasons that we know today didn't really exist before the flood. Not
so
only the earth changed, even in how it's run. For it says seed time and harvest, cold and heat. This is talking about the seasons, and day and night shall not cease. Well, what shall not cease? Seed time and harvest, meaning planting. God is not going to destroy man again to where man ends in his seed time and harvest, in his working the earth. The seasons are going to continue. The book I have on Noah actually explains that before the flood, the earth, one of the reasons some of the Torah sages teaches us why God permitted the eating of meat is before the flood, the earth was so rich and nutritious that they only had to plant once in 40 years. Practically once a generation, there was a harvest. It was so plentiful. And because of that, also, a lot of lacks, man become depraved. There's a lot of things that the earth was that now after the flood, we have to work a whole lot harder. Our lifespan is cut down we have to plant every year. Almost every season has its own planting, except for probably dead of winter in those climates. And so this is not going to cease. And so after the flood, you need to understand when the Torah sages teach us when the flood happened, and it says that, the rains came down and the fountains broke forth. The fountains wasn't just the aquifers that was bursting of water. It was also volcanic. There's the sages teaches that water was boiling. It's one reason why we don't have a lot of artifacts and things from that time, because the earth was leached. The heat of the water leached the earth of its nutrients. And therefore, after the earth, I've read some of the Torah sages teaches the giving of the eating of meat was to supplement man from things that he wasn't going to be getting from the earth anymore. And so the water was just gushing and boiling, and it was very torrential. And even in the Hebrew, where it says, and the ark was lifted, in the wording of the Hebrew there, the sages teaches that God literally lifted the ark above the turbulent waters, the boiling water beneath it. And as it cooled down and as it became calm, he set the ark down in the water. So the ark wasn't affected by the torrential flood that was going on. And so it's really interesting. The seed time and harvest means that the seasons are not going to stop, and it shall not cease. I know Bob's sitting there granted, I'm not going to get into that tonight. But that's what this means here. This means the continuation of the way the earth operates in its seasons, and the way man works the earth in seed time and harvest, in the cold and in the heat, the summer and the winter, in the day and the night. God is not going to cause any of that to cease. See, when during the flood, all seed time and harvest and any kind of whatever was going on before flood, it came to a stop. Everything came to a stop on earth, and that's not going to happen anymore.
Exactly. So Bob, not Bob Wells, but this Bob on Power Faith Radio. So he would love in the future for us to get on this conversation of exactly what we're talking about here. But all of this that we read here, the Creator said in his heart. This was not spoken. It
right.
This is what was said in his heart.
He said in his heart. I mean, he doesn't have a physical heart like we do.
Exactly. It's more.
He has to use human terminology so we can understand his attribute of what is going on in his mind. That, it's like you as a person, and you've gone, maybe you've done something that necessarily wasn't wrong, but it could have been done different.
Yeah.
And you say in yourself, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so we see here that the Creator is not going to do that to his creation. And it's interesting because in the Hebrew, I bet you I'll drop Yep, I did. In the Hebrew, where it is talking here, I'll just tell you here, I was going to read it in the Hebrew to you. But here over in verse 9, where it's talking about what's interesting, where it's an everlasting, down here where it says everlasting covenant, that means Brit Shalom. And where it says every beast of every beast of the field, it says with every living being that is with you. In the Hebrew here, where the word being is nephesh, or soul, every living soul that is with you. God is not going to destroy the earth. And seed time and harvest will continue. Cold and night, the seasons that we have that's a perspective to our countries, because the seasons vary, depending on the hemisphere you live at in the northern and southern regions. But the way he designed them, and another thing too is man, when he sent man out to the world, it's interesting. The sages teaches us that the people who settle the lands of the earth, God blesses that people to be able to live in that land, because every land has a different character to it. Like, we talk about the Eskimos and the snow, and the people that live in the mountains, the people that live in the deserts, the people who live on the, the coast and the seas. All of these different areas yields a different form of climate and character that the people are able to endure. And so that ties into that as well. Anything else, Scotty?
No, I'm taking care of something over here on YouTube.
Okay.
So
all right. I'll bring it to a close here, where it says here, and it shall happen when I place a cloud over the earth, and a bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant between you and me and every living being in all flesh, and the water shall never become a flood to destroy all flesh. I'm trying to look at my notes here. I got my little arrows going from here to there. Let me see where I'm at. No, because I wanted to. Let's see, I've done the wrong one. Let me go page 292. I think it's Rabbi Hirsch. Oops, sorry, guys. Is it? Nope. Rabbi Hirsch. Like I told you, I even cut down a few of the books. I said, I think I'm not going to do that. And Scotty's probably going, I'm glad he didn't. Sometimes I send Scotty a picture of what's going on my desk through the week. Page 292. Is it here on two? Yeah, where he sets the cloud in the sky. It's where it talks about a wrathful cloud. When God puts a wrathful cloud in the sky, and then the bow appears. We need to understand that when a bow appears in the sky, it is a sign. Now, a sign there, God gives several signs in the Torah. He gives the sign here of the bow for all the nations. He gives a sign of circumcision to Abraham and his children through Isaac, and he gives the Sabbath as a sign to Israel as a people. And so he sets out many signs. And it says that he sets this bow as a wrathful, or this cloud. I find this interesting because it says, when I place a cloud over the earth, that means that things are at the point of flood level. Man has become so immoral and unethical and immoral that God places this cloud that can become a destroying force. And then when the bow appears in it, he remembers his covenant. And what some of the sages really teach is really interesting. Of course, they look at it from old, like old military terms. It's a bow, like a bow and arrow. The bow is upside down. It's not curved toward the earth as if an archer would shoot an arrow. They even use that terminology, that God is not going to shoot an arrow, that the bow, the way it is shaped, is like a bow when an archer is carrying a bow in his hand, which means he's approaching in peace. But on the other hand, where it says is when I put the cloud over the earth and the bow is in the cloud, he goes, and I remember my covenant. So what should the rainbow mean for us? It should be a reminder that our generation is worthy of destruction. So it should stir in us to do repentance. That we should, when we see a rainbow, even as beautiful it is, we should remember that the reason that is there is because God is reminding himself not to strike. And so therefore it should encourage us to repent and should encourage us to help, to lead others to repentance. Matter of fact, there is Jewish tradition. So when there's righteousness in the land, there is no rainbow. And there were two kings. Hezekiah was one. And I don't remember the other, but there was two kings when they reigned in Israel that it is recorded during their reigns, there was never a rainbow. That the land was in righteousness and never reached the level of needing to see a rainbow. And so that's one thing, we always we take these nice, beautiful pictures. I've done it from my deck before, in rainbow after a storm. It's really cool, but it should remind us that bow is there because God is reminding himself not to strike. And that should move within us to give praise to him for his grace and his mercy, but also to seek his forgiveness in areas of our life that may be lacking. So let's say there's a lot to our covenant to understand. And that bow represents, there's actually 7 colors. And even the sages teach us there's 7 colors, and there are 7 categorical commands for man to live by, to live ethical and morally. And so not only that, when we're repenting, what are we repenting of? We've done something, our community, our nation, ourselves, we've done something to violate something within those 7 areas that the bow should stir us to repentance and contemplation of God's grace, his mercy, but also his justice and the ways he wants us to live. Go ahead, Scotty. Nope, you're muted.
Am I there now?
You're there now.
Nope, that's good. I was just sending a last text to somebody. So, okay. All right.
I hope this helped, because we was talking about the way Rabbi Weiner wrote right here is what actually got me to thinking about all of this. And again, if anybody's got any questions in this area, feel free to, if you comes to you later, jot them down, get them to Scotty so we can discuss. But Rabbi Weiner says, surely this was a quantitatively smaller prophecy, the one about building the ark, in comparison to the greater prophecy of Noah after the flood, in which God made the everlasting covenant, the Brit Shalom of the rainbow, that he would never bring another wholesale destruction of mankind. So we need to know why. Why did he destroy mankind? Why is he not going to destroy mankind? I mean, what would we do to bring God to the point of needing a reminder not to do it? See, we don't think like that. That he will not bring a wholesale destruction of mankind. Why? What would it be that mankind would do to even cause God to want to do that? Our actions. What is our actions that's putting God in a situation to remind himself to back off? You've thought about this. So when we read these things, we need to, to try to develop questions that we can ponder and meditate on. Leaving only a saving remedy. It said he commanded the 7 laws, and those were prophecies for all future generations for the world, for the whole world. This was for us and for our children and their children forever. This is an everlasting covenant. It's a Brit Shalom. I mean, a Brit Olam. It's forever. And we need to question why God brought the flood. Why is he having to remind himself? Because if he's having to remind himself not to destroy, that means we're giving him a reason to do it. Think about that.
All right, Terry. It's almost been an hour and a half. So I'm going to bring us to a close.
I didn't know we were going to go that long tonight, Scotty, but that's okay.
Well, no, I thought it was good. So I hated I had to drop in and out. I had
No, that's a problem.
a couple of things to take care of over on YouTube, but we're so glad everybody joined us tonight. And Bob, thank you so much for participating in the class tonight. So I'm just going to, since we're almost at an hour and a half, I'm just going to bring it to a quick close. We thank everybody, every one of the platforms, all the social media platforms for coming tonight. And please, you can send us an email to outreachnoah@gmail.com. Go visit our webpage at outreachnoah.com. All right.
Where are you broadcasting from?
Broadcasting from the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. You're listening to Power Faith Radio. So, okay, there we go. So, all right. We'll see everybody later.
Later.
All right. Bye-bye.